This is my second last video for all of the trial decks. This video is going to be all about the Machine Herald VIKTOR. VIKTOR wants to build up a board of wide bodies. It doesn't matter how big they are. He's trying to summon in lots of units that can steal power in the early stages of the game for very low commitment, where other people might have to risk a bit more. VIKTOR can kind of just sneak on in there, get some early game points, and then in the later stages of the game set up for a devastating combo to close out the game. Truth be told, his legend ability isn't super energy efficient, but it's something you always have available to yourself, so even with a bad opening hand, you can at least put a unit on the board, or in the later stages of the game, you can weave in just 2 energy that you otherwise wouldn't spend. I would say, though, to be very careful about using this at the end of your turn, because you always want to have a little bit of energy available to you, especially while you have a card like Stupefy or a card like Siphon Power in your hand, which we're going to go over in just a second. Speaking of which, let's talk about some of the payoff cards for the deck. I would say the 2 biggest payoffs for the deck are Siphon Power and Grand Stratagem. First, starting with Siphon Power, this is VIKTOR's spell, so only VIKTOR can use this. The fact that this not only buffs your units by +1, but it also reduces the might of opponents' units by 1 is completely crazy. It's a huge board swing. One thing to keep in mind about this that people seem to forget or don't seem to interpret, when you choose this battlefield, it's not like an aura you're putting on the battlefield. You're just choosing the target. So only units that are currently at that battlefield are going to be affected for this. Even though it says until end of turn, it's just saying that the units affected by this will have +1 until the end of turn, or -1, depending on whether they're an enemy or a friendly. So if your opponent pushes to attack you and you use Siphon Power to give all your units +1 and one of theirs -1, and then they push a unit later on in that turn, that enemy unit, the newly added enemy unit, won't have -1. Your units will still have +1 from the earlier played Siphon Power, but the new enemy unit will not. It's still a massive board wipe, it's a good defensive tool, and it's a good aggressive tool. This is a huge part of why VIKTOR works. And similar things can be said for Grand Stratagem. While it is significantly more expensive, it is a 5-point swing on every unit, as opposed to the 2-point swing on every unit. And that 5-point swing is all jumped onto your units as opposed to your opponent's units. And of course, because it's not affecting a battlefield, you can distribute that however you like. There's so many board states we end up in 4-player lobbies where it's just like, okay, well, if the VIKTOR has a Grand Stratagem, I guess we just lose. I will say though, if you're playing just the trial deck and not modifying your deck pool at all, keep in mind that you only have 1 copy of this in the trial deck. Next, we're going to go over the core engine cards. Wraith of Echoes draws a card each turn for as long as a unit dies. Especially in like a 4-player game, if you put this card down and you push onto 3 different battlefields, one of your units dies during your turn, before it gets back to your turn, you might draw 3 new cards. Probably not going to happen very often, but, potentially a lot of card draw. Speaking of units that generate more stuff for you when your units die, it's a VIKTOR. This is our partner champion because we currently don't have a blue VIKTOR, though I assume we are getting a blue VIKTOR. In fact, I believe it's confirmed now that all legends with a multicolored split, which I believe will be all legends, will indeed have 2 champions, 1 for each of their color. We've already seen the yellow VIKTOR, so it's just a matter of time before we see the blue VIKTOR, but for now, yellow VIKTOR is going to be generating more tokens for you whenever a non-recruit unit dies, meaning whenever a non-token dies, you will get a new token. These next 3 cards are kind of a part of the core engine, but they don't really generate value in the same way that VIKTOR and Wraith of Echoes did, so I didn't really want to include them in the same segment. The 3 cards I was thinking of were Faithful Manufacturer, who is just a 3-mana 2 might that generates a recruit. Truth be told, the stats on this aren't incredible, but it's an extra body, and that extra body can be really useful for a variety of reasons in the VIKTOR deck. Machine Evangel is interesting because it generates so many bodies, but it is so expensive at just 4 might. I'm really undecided on how good this is. I go back and forth on how good I think it is. It's got this weird effect where when I play with it, I'm like, wow, this card feels way too expensive. And then when I play against it, I'm like, whoa, that's really hard to deal with. So I don't know how I feel about this card yet, whether I think it's really strong or probably not worth your time, but at the end of the day, it's generating 3 bodies for you, and as long as you're just playing with trial decks, you're not going to go wrong with playing this guy on curve, I don't think, unless you're building up for like a specific combo the following turn. Vanguard Captain can feel pretty awkward because even though she's generating 2 bodies, which is fantastic, right? Those recruits are great. She has Legion, meaning that she can't be the first card that you played for the turn. I mean, she can be the first card that you played for the turn, but if you do play her for your first card, she's not going to get her Legion effect. One of the good ways to resolve a Legion effect is with any of the seals. We have a yellow seal, which is the Seal of Unity. So this is a 0-cost way and very low commitment way for us to getting a single play, or a card played, I should say, and then immediately play Vanguard Captain, which will now see that we've played Seal of Unity, and without any additional cost, we do get to generate those units. One thing I'll quickly mention is as we go back to the legend version of VIKTOR, even though VIKTOR says 2 plus an exhaust play a 1 might unit token, that does not resolve Vanguard Captain's Legion effect. Legion is specifically looking for you to have played another card, and tokens are not considered cards. So even though Machine Herald is specifically saying play this, the this that he's referring to is not considered a card, at least as far as Legion is concerned. That would not have been my guess, but it's been confirmed to us that that is indeed how it works. I guess I'll move on to what I'll describe as filler units, but that doesn't mean that these are necessarily bad. In fact, I think most of these are pretty solid. We have Soaring Scout, which can generate a rune for you, which is pretty fantastic for just 2 cost. I think that this Soaring Scout card is probably going to see a lot of play in a lot of decks. Just seems like really good. Watchful Sentry is similarly good. It's the same stat line as Soaring Scout, but this one is drawing you a card. Cruel Patron is very different though. Cruel Patron is kind of like buffing up a unit if you really want to think about it. A lot of the time when you play this card, at least in this deck, you're going to be playing it to destroy off one of your recruits, one of your recruit tokens, which is kind of like turning a 1 might thing into a 6 might thing. So it's kind of like 4 energy, give something +5. It's obviously not quite like that, but this is kind of a cool way to push out a token, get a point, and then kill that token by replacing it with a Cruel Patron, so you get some kind of free scoring there, like free in quotations. I go back and forth on how strong I think this is, but at the end of the day, 6 might is so much might. There's just a good chance that when you play this card, it's going to be sticking to the board for some time. I do want to quickly point out an interaction. If you have a recruit at a battlefield, you cannot use a Cruel Patron to destroy it as you play the Cruel Patron here. At least that's our current interpretation based off of something we recently heard from Riot. It sounds like that we shouldn't be able to play a Cruel Patron to play this recruit here, because as an additional cost to play this card, you must destroy this recruit, meaning that the recruit is leaving play before Cruel Patron touches the board, which means you don't control this battlefield at the time of you playing your Cruel Patron. So you would need at least 2 here if you wanted to play Cruel Patron and kill this, because the second you try to play Cruel Patron and kill this, you no longer control this, so Cruel Patron must be played to your base. Next up, I want to move on to removal and tech that the deck has access to, and there's actually so much of it. First, let's go over Cull, which is an absolutely crazy spell. Every single time this card gets played, it feels like there's a massive tempo swing in the game. This is probably one of the strongest removal cards in the game. The fact that you can just destroy one of your tokens, or you can even just play this before you have any units on the board, and the opponent actually has to give up an important resource. The amount of times I've seen someone play like a 10-cost Volibear and then do nothing else on their turn, and then the Viktor just plays Cull. Cull was a 2-cost investment to kill off a 10 energy card. Like, how sad are you if you're that Volibear player? Newsflash, I'm that Volibear player. That keeps happening to me. And it's a big part of the reason that of all of the trial decks, Viktor feels really strong in like a 4-player lobby with each of the trial decks, because this color card just performs really well against the field. Harness Dragon is substantially slower than Cull, but it allows you to select the target, and at least based on the way the card is worded, it seems like you can target anything with Harness Dragon, or at least anything on the board, meaning that it can be at the base, it can be at a battlefield, it can do whatever it wants, which does make it a flexible card. It's just really expensive. Hidden Blade is our first hidden card, and these kind of function like similar to secrets or trap cards, depending on your favorite card game, but once they go onto the board, they can go face down, but they don't need to go face down. Think of hidden as an alternate cost. So let's ignore the hidden keyword for a second and just focus on the card itself. When you play this card, it costs 2 energy and 1 power, meaning that you need to exhaust 2 runes and recycle 1. When you do that, you get to kill a unit at a battlefield. Any battlefield, you get to kill a unit, but the controller draws 2 cards. Again, a really strong removal tool. But in addition to its regular text, it has hidden, which means you can hide this card face down at a battlefield you control, but it costs you 1 rune, or sorry, I should say 1 power, meaning that you need to recycle a rune, to place this card face down at a battlefield you control. As a reaction, you can use this card to destroy a unit at a battlefield. Now, something to know about hidden cards, while they're at a battlefield face down, they have to target things at that battlefield. So even though the wording on Hidden Blade would suggest that you can target any battlefield, if it's played as a hidden card, it must target things that are at that battlefield. Hidden Blade is such a flexible and versatile tool. You can use it to destroy your own units to draw 2 cards. You can use it to destroy a high priority unit. You can use it to set up on a battlefield and just sit defensively at that battlefield. Basically, it's really hard for an opponent to push your battlefield if you're sitting there with a Hidden Blade. And I can only imagine this card getting better and better the more hidden cards there are in the game, because if you play any hidden card, they have to play around Hidden Blade, which often means they're going to have to push their units in an unoptimal order, and even if you don't have that Hidden Blade, it's going to feel pretty bad for them. Right now, Hidden Blade feels at its weakest, and it already feels really strong, but Hidden Blade feels at its weakest while there's just the one hidden card, because as soon as you play it, everyone knows, well, they've got a Hidden Blade. Next up, we've got Stupefy, which is a -1 might on a unit, and then draw a card. This is a super flexible card. One cost to draw a card is already like a fantastic start. Its reaction, giving a unit -1 is absolutely massive. It's a combat trick. Being able to give opponents -1 might can make a huge difference, especially for effects that scale based on might as well. I think that this is like an auto-include 3 of when we start doing more deck building stuff with blue. Unfortunately, we only have like 4 blue cards right now. Technically, we have 5 if you count Heimerdinger, but we have so few blue cards right now, there's not much deck building you can do. But it would be pretty surprising to me if Stupefy wasn't 3 of in like every blue deck right now, at least in the base set, while we only have 298 cards. Unchecked Power is a massive board wipe. However, it is a focused board wipe, and you have to exhaust all of your units, meaning that it can only be played during your opponent's turn, and when you do play it, you have to exhaust all of your units. So you're doing one of two things: you're killing your own units with this, or you are, which seems silly to do because you could always just bring them back to your base and then play this. So more likely than not, you're exhausting all of your units, and because this is a 7 energy spell, it seems really unlikely that you're doing much else. You're using 7, you're wiping the board, but in a multiplayer game, there's now 3 people who have a turn to develop before you get a chance to play another card. Maybe you use Unchecked Power and then you play like a Viktor or something, and then that's like your setup or whatever, but usually people are going to have a quicker time stabilizing than you will as the Viktor player. This does seem like a card that probably improves with deck building as we see the card pool expand and we get more and more card reveals, but right now in 4-player lobbies, I honestly think this feels pretty weak, especially when people start playing around it and they don't put so much power on the board, or at least not on battlefields, I should say. I do think that this card has a lot of potential in 2v2 specifically. Turns that happen before it gets back to you is going to be an ally's turn. So I could see this card being substantially better in 2v2 than it is in the current 2 formats that we have available to us, 1 versus 1 and free-for-all. Honestly, I had a lot of fun talking about the Viktor cards. There's a lot of cool cards in the Viktor lineup. I will say, unfortunately, I don't have any suggestions for cards that you should put into Viktor, because all of the Viktor legal cards are just the cards in the Viktor deck, with one exception, Heimerdinger, which Heimerdinger has the effects of all exhaust cards. But unfortunately, the sad thing about Heimerdinger with the currently revealed pool of cards is that he doesn't have much to trigger off of. He can trigger off of Viktor himself, so you can play Heimerdinger and then use Heimerdinger's ability to use Machine Herald's ability, but you do have to pay the cost on a Machine Herald. So it would be play 3 energy, 1 power to put Heimerdinger in play, then spend another 2 energy to resolve Viktor's effect, and then spend another 2 energy to resolve Heimerdinger's effect, or to resolve another Viktor effect as Heimerdinger. You do have the Seal of Unity, which is kind of interesting tech for Heimerdinger, because it's like a Seal of Unity with a body. You can put Seal of Unity in play, and then later on you can play Heimerdinger, and then you can exhaust, which will trigger the Seal of Unity effect, generating you 2 sources of order power. But honestly, right now, none of this is worth it. I'll talk more about Heimerdinger in a future video, because I have a lot to say about that. Maybe I'll do like a full set review video of all the cards that we have right now, because I think that could be pretty fun. Anyway, I have one more trial deck to cover, and that's going to be Volibear. Keep an eye out for that. Thank you so much for watching. Keep being awesome, and I'll catch you in the next one.